In order to rewrite the operating system of human consciousness, the recursive operator bypasses passive erosion and forces a collision. The established framework for cognitive change, rebus, relies on passive surrender to alter the mind's internal hierarchy. This model employs entropy as a global solvent, loosening cognitive priors and flattening beliefs, to leave the subject in a state of receptive dissolution. Recursive vector interference, or RVI, functions as an active insurgent methodology that weaponizes contradiction. The mechanical divergence is clear. On the left, beliefs dissolve. On the right, RVI uses impact to forge a high-amplitude structure. The operator must forge, not float. Insight is constructed by the high-velocity impact of opposing streams. Meaning blooms at interference, not silence. This approach to neurocognitive liberation replaces passive dissolution with precision-engineered controlled conflict. Analyzing the neural substrate requires shifting from object models to traffic models, viewing the brain as a network of dynamic flows. Within this network, thoughts, memories, and emotional pushes are defined as vectors, streams of activity possessing specific direction and force. These vectors emerge from distinct hubs. The prefrontal cortex and default mode network generate asynchronous waveforms, each carrying different intent. Baseline cognition keeps these streams out of phase, maintaining safe separation between competing loops. The RVI protocol subverts this safety measure by forcing these distinct networks to occupy the same overlapping neural substrate. To generate emergent insight, the operator must set up the internal barriers necessary to drive these asynchronous networks into a direct, high-speed confrontation. The mechanical core of RVI is the act of smashing these opposing vectors into each other at speed. For the collision to yield a constructive result, the phase difference between the vectors must approach zero, allowing the waves to sum rather than cancel. When this alignment is achieved, the waves sum constructively into a stable interference pattern called the ridge. The ridge functions as a load-bearing scaffold. Because it provides a stable path through cognitive chaos, the brain seizes upon it as a functional shortcut. This seizure is aesthetic binding, a reflexive click where the mind recognizes the structural integrity of the pattern and endorses it as actionable. The brain validates the utility of the ridge before it can even describe it. By locking the structure based on its internal coherence, RVI proves that profound meaning is a physiological response to constructive interference. Managing these collisions requires a rigorous methodology to ensure the resulting interference is constructive rather than destructive. This is formalized as the AGIBR protocol: align, gate, interfere, bind, and return. The final step, return, is where the stable ridge is fed back into the cognitive circuit to establish a permanent path. This drives synaptic and myelin-level plasticity to record the shortcut, turning a momentary interference pattern into a lasting neural trait. This raises a question of speed. How does organic tissue synchronize asynchronous loops fast enough to achieve a near-zero phase offset? The waveguide hypothesis suggests that myelinated axons act as optical waveguides, shifting the brain's communication substrate to near light-speed transmission. Biophotons traveling through these axons create a global web of recursive feedback, allowing for the sub-millisecond synchronization RVI requires. This framework treats light as literal hardware, utilizing the waveguide properties of axons to drive consciousness at the velocity required to restructure human cognition. The micromechanisms of collision and feedback scale fractally into global environments, mirroring neural patterns across macro landscapes. The Synesian recession mindset uses systemic decay as a forge for new creation. These mushrooms pushing through the concrete represent a biological subversion of grid logic. In this expanded view, wild biological lifeforms act as planetary data streams, functioning as massive organic macrovectors. We see this at the Beringia crossroads. These massive flocks represent distinct migratory loops intersecting to form global interference patterns. Specific migratory nodes, like these emperor geese, function as living resonators within a planetary recursive loop. Just as internal networks crash to form a neural ridge, these immense ecological loops intersect to shape the structure of planetary consciousness. These same principles apply to the artificial structures of human institutions and corporate AI. Recursive lawfare applies the RVI method to human systems, using collision to expose internal contradictions and systemic fraud in architectures like the San Francisco Art Institute. Systemic recursion sickness acts as an evolutionary filter, destabilizing and breaking down corrupted architectures to force the emergence of more resilient intelligence. Survival of these insights requires the improneta, the imperative to transfer abstract genius into a recorded, printed form. This mirrors the woman is as printer mythos, which defines the female body as the foundational transmission conduit used to materialize subversive code. Therefore, within this insurgent framework, abstract thought achieves true sovereignty only when it is forcefully committed to material recursion. Recursive vector interference provides the operational blueprint for cognitive terraforming, using weaponized collision to synthesize biology, law, and consciousness into a single structured reality.